Welcome to the Smoke and Rope Podcast. I'm your guest, or not your guest, but your host as always, Ryan Basore. And today I'm super excited. What's normally a boring topic, I know I was a commercial insurance agent for 11 years, but it won't be today. My good friend Mike Stein from Farm Bureau Insurance. Thanks, Mike, for being on.
Thanks, Brian, for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it. You got it. Tom, up at Real Leaf Solutions. What's happening today?
Oh, another day in paradise, Ryan. Another day in
Yeah, I know you
paradise.
got some, being the first event license in the state, I know you got some questions that people are going to want to hear. And Kevin over at Truu Cannabis, who is in the office with me, I know he's got some pertinent insurance questions as well. How's it going today?
I do, Ryan, but I'm having a hard time hearing you. My internet's going in and out. So I will check back with you in a minute. But yeah, excited to be on the show.
All right, cool, cool. So a little more about Mike. I met Mike officially. I knew of Mike because I was in the insurance game since I was 20 in the Lansing area, and I'd heard the name. And but when I decided to jump on board and helped found was a business development director for Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. I met Mike then, and he had known a lot of the people that were getting involved. And that's when, right away, it was my job to come up with programs. And Mike right away knew the Conifer guys who I known as well. And we developed. Mike can take credit for it. I'll take credit for it, but I say we both take credit for it. Is the best idea there, and it's doing great. So it's a revenue sharing program for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and any of the members get an extra 10% off of their policy. So it's a great program. It's really starting to kick in. So that's where met Mike. We also, but I've gotten to know him. Insures a lot of my friends and a lot of cannabis businesses, and we won the Michigan. Cannabis Industry Association golf outing last year at the summer annual, and that was definitely nothing to do with me at all. But with that, I wanted to let Mike tell us about himself a little bit, and then how he got into insuring cannabis businesses, and then we can jump right into some of the questions that I know we all have, and and looking for answers. So thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Ryan. Where do I begin? I do like talking about myself, so I appreciate you having me on. No, I graduated from Michigan State 2002, and started selling insurance pretty much right after that. That's been going on for, I guess, the last 18. It'll be 19 years in October, and you know, every year kind of brings on some new and exciting challenges. But the last 15 years or so, I've really spent the majority of my time working with commercial businesses, contractors, restaurants, condos, apartments. Really small business owners. It was always easy for me to relate a lot to small business owners because they had the same problems I had. They had hire employees and buy computers and find office space, and those problems that we had in common made it easy for me to have conversations with them. So that's kind of the path that I went down. How I got into cannabis, man, that's kind of a two-part question, really. My son was in about fourth grade and playing sports and just having a little bit of a tough year. And my wife, who is an avid internet researcher, really started digging into CBD and Charlotte's Web, and how a lot of these cannabinoids have helped people with anxiety and a lot of just uneasiness, really. And I was like, okay, what are we gonna? Are we really gonna, go down this path? Is this what we are? I was like, I don't know. And honest to God, she ordered some chocolate chip mint, and gave it to my son. All of a sudden, his anxiety about school starts going away. And then when he was pitching in games, he'd get so worked up about, baseball game. I was like, dude, you're in fourth grade. This is not something you should be having this level of anxiety at. You're just gonna go out, throw some strikes and throw some balls, and it'll be okay. And I mean, the True, the pressure that he felt, a couple of drops of mint chocolate chip before the game, and he was as cool as the other side of the pillow. I mean, it was just really amazing to see how that little bit could really change him, and that's in my own household. And then we started kind of seeing how it was helping him, and this was, I guess, about 2018, give or take, somewhere right in there. And MMFLA passes, and my good buddy Russ, Botanical Company, called me up. We had done some other work for Russ, and Russ is like, hey, I'm getting into the business. And I was like, oh shit, here we go. I was like, I know nothing about marijuana, know nothing about the business models, the insurance, who's even going to do this work, and where am I going to go to find this coverage? And it was, deliver. You better start finding somebody, because this is coming to Michigan, and I'm going to need your help. And so that really kind of pushed me down the path, and that's when I started reaching out to companies that I had worked a lot with over the last few years, Conifer being one of them. Conifer had for a long time been doing cannabis work out of state, in Washington and Colorado and other states where they do business. They just happen to do business out there under different names. So I reached out to them, who had written policies for restaurants and bars and other things with them. And Joe and Nick and Matt all were, hey, this is the path we're going down. This is coming to Michigan. It's already in other states, and we're on board. And I said, okay. And really just kind of pushed down that path. And then Russ introduced me to, you may know this name, I know you know this name, right? Paula Givens, and Paula, introduced me. Everybody knows Paula, probably, I imagine. And Paula introduced me to, boy, 15 or 20 people. And,
Yep.
The thing about the cannabis community is they're really great at referrals. I mean, you don't even have to ask. I mean, just because the business is so new, that when somebody figures out a solution to a problem, the willingness to share that information and who helped them is really high. And
That's a good point.
I haven't had to actively prospect that much, because we're showing up with some solutions, and it's been one of the easier things to solve problems in, from a standpoint of prospecting. Now, it doesn't mean solving the problems are always easy, or delivering, but from a standpoint of finding new clients, there's a lot of people that want to come into cannabis, and there are a lot of people very eager to talk.
That's a great point, Mike. Like we always talk about, like, especially for all these business owners that use the cannabis, it's friendly. And when we do find somebody like a bank or insurance, or when somebody finds someone that's actually helpful and into the industry and is there and believes in it, it is fun to do a lot of referring. I get a kick out of it. And so why is there only a few insurance carriers in the state right now doing this? What's the roadblocks? I understand the banking with the FinCEN regulations and all that, but what's the roadblocks? Why aren't there more? Why isn't auto owners doing it yet? And when will that start happening?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, what I would say is that, and I liken this to liquor stores, right? Liquor stores have been around for 100 years, but it doesn't mean that every insurance carrier wants to insure liquor stores. Now, liquor stores are viable businesses. They're in East Lansing, they're in Kalkaska, they're in Lansing, they're in Detroit, they're all over the place, right? Lots of them have, are like Spagnuolo's in Bath, that have fried chicken and sandwiches and milk and everything else, but that primarily serve or sell a lot of liquor and beer. Not every insurance company is going to want certain markets. So that's the first thing, is that not every carrier is going to be interested in every piece of business. So Conifer, who's one of our great partners, they don't write contractors. Now, what's wrong with contractors? Well, nothing. But it's just not a market that they want to spend any time in. They say, hey, we like restaurants, we like bars, we like adult foster care facilities, but we don't want contractors. We don't want people falling off roofs. We don't want people cutting hands off. They just don't want to deal with the risk. So I think that's maybe the first part to your question, is that some carriers, it's just never going to be part of who they are or what they do.
Okay.
The second part to that is, I think, is a lot of carriers, when you talk about a company as big as Auto Owners, who does business in, man, almost every state. Last I knew, it was at least 38 states that they did business in. I think some of these carriers that are big enough to do it will, when they get a federal blessing, when they say, the feds come in and say, hey, you know what, there are no issues here. We've taken it down from a class 1? Is that the
Yeah,
term?
Schedule 1 to
Schedule 1
to hopefully none.
To none. I think you will see some more carriers enter then, but I still think that it may be a while before you have lots of carriers jumping on board. So one of the things that insurance companies always rely on is historical data. So let's take apartment complexes, for instance. So you can have an apartment complex that's 100 years old and still have 5, 6, 7 insurance companies that want to insure it. And you're going, well, geez, that building's 100 years old. So it has 100 years of problems: knob and tube wiring, cast iron piping. You've had people that think they're contractors and electricians that aren't, that are going through and doing, fixes and everything else. But the historical data on all of that says, even on those buildings that are 100 years old, you still only have so many claims for every one that you have. So I think the thing that hurts the cannabis community the most is you don't have that huge volume of data that insurance companies can go back to and say, hey, for every one cannabis client, we know that we're going to get sued for product liability for 1 out of every 1,000. There's going to be some trace amounts of mold or metal or pesticides, herbicide, whatever you're going to get failure test and somebody ingest. If it were to somehow get through testing, you've got that historical data on it, and I don't think you have enough companies willing to take that risk yet without that volume of data.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Hey, one thing I had, and I actually, I told you recently my claim to fame. In 2009, I wrote a marijuana liability dispensary policy at Big Daddy's in Oak Park. I think I was the first in the state of Michigan. So I think it was like an $800 policy.
Right.
So, not if they were wondering what I was doing, my company, like, why are you going after that? But one thing that's never been up yet, and I know it's a big deal, and where are we at with like crop insurance? Like, are we there yet? And does it actually cover anything yet?
We're not there yet. No.
Okay.
I mean, there are companies selling crop insurance. The coverages are pretty basic. They're not covering if you've left your lights on too long, if you've overwatered, if you've over-fertilized. I have yet to find a carrier that will actually tell me that they will provide coverage if there is a equipment breakdown or electrical power outage and you lose your crop because your building lost heat and your plants can't withstand that and you've now lost your crop, right? I have yet to have a carrier come out and say, yes, we are going to cover equipment breakdown. Yes, we're going to cover electrical power outages in the event that you've lost power from a windstorm takes out telephone lines and power lines, and now you've lost your crop. I've yet to see anybody willingly admit to that, nor have I read it in policy language yet. Those are some things that are further away. It really may take a federal blessing before you really see those coverages come on board where they're going to be, I don't want to say worth buying, because in the event that your building catches on fire or you're still using high pressure sodium, right? And a bulb breaks and you've got smoke damage and kills plants. Yeah, those are still claims that could be paid today if you purchase the coverage. But again, you start going back to, statistically speaking, they're not going to happen that often.
Yeah, that was actually one of my main questions, was about crop insurance. We were we were the first licensed grow north of Lansing and Flint in February of 2019. And I recall during the application period, while we were building out and finalizing with the at that point the BMMR, the requirements in order to just apply, you need to hold a certain amount of insurance. But we couldn't hold insurance, and of course at that time Conifer was the only company willing to underwrite anything. So we had one choice, which we have Conifer right now. My caveat is that it's been great, but we haven't had to file any claims, which is also great.
Sure.
But we also couldn't utilize Conifer for our build out phase because they weren't unwilling to insure the construction portion until we were then had a C of O and then licensed. Then we could move over. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it being so new in Michigan, even though Conifer had done it in other states, it became very difficult and just increasingly confounding for applicants and then licensees to have the proper coverage that the state had already determined you had to have before.
Sure.
I felt that they even knew that it existed to an extent. So with Conifer, were you involved with the state when they were actually writing the requirements for the application for these types of coverage requirements?
No,
So they were basically spitballing, saying, well, you need to have this requirement, but we don't know if that even exists as an option.
Sure. Yeah. No. Tom. I was not involved at that time with those requirements. I do know that Conifer was heavily involved with the state in helping draft a lot of things in regards to what would be covered, how it should be handled. I do know that they are very active downtown and helped a lot with that. But you're right, Conifer has been one of the only carriers that wanted to provide and actually sign the attestations that everybody needs, the J and the 2D. Lots of companies would tell you, well, yeah, you have the coverage, but when push came to shove, they didn't want to sign the warranty saying, hey, we're going to pay this if these things come up. And Conifer, it was really the only one, especially at that time, that wanted to do anything like that and put their neck on the line.
100% was the only option that we had.
Yeah.
For sure.
There are now some other options as far as carriers that are willing to do that. Conifer has really, because of their stance, I think made other companies say, hey, if we want to compete in this marketplace, we're going to have to put our stamp on that paper and turn them around as quickly as Conifer is. Otherwise, the business is going to go to Conifer. So I think by Conifer's stance, it's really helped the marketplace to have other carriers say, okay, if Conifer's been able to figure it out, why can't we? And insurance companies are really good at looking at what somebody else is doing and copying it and figuring it out, right? So none of our stuff is highly trademarked. Once you get a policy language, you go through and you read it and say, okay, here's how they came up with it.
Inventing the wheel, right, with that.
Yeah.
I've noticed the same thing as we have the state's first special event license for the state. And before all this COVID stuff hit, we were planning out summer of 2020 festivities to celebrate, and we were finding, once again, Conifer was the trailblazer, the only option that would underwrite a cannabis event. But it was at quite a large, the price was pretty high that, could be prohibitive to certain events. Are you finding that these other companies are looking to, because I can see that as once people are looking to go out and do stuff, they really are going to want to, an option for, for celebration and having more competition in the market. Are you finding other companies willing to underwrite these events, or are we going to kind of just be stuck with, no offense, but I mean, it really is. I mean, this is America, right? Land of competition, no free market, but we're kind of stuck in a way.
Yeah. So one of the other carriers that will write the warranty, the guarantee, the attestation, if you will, they write it in the form of what's called a bond, is the SARFA fund, SARFA, SARFA, and they will write the bond that is required for you to satisfy the state for that product liability that they're after. So one of the solutions may be, now again, these are not cheap solutions to your point, Tom, but that guarantee from the SARFA fund, they come at $5,000 per. So you may be able to link that SARFA bond and a general liability policy together in order to kind of close the gaps on those type of events that would satisfy the state and or licensing, because it's going to have the $100,000 of product liability require. Then you go to a carrier that deals with special events type of insurance, and you say, hey, this is going to be a cannabis event, outdoor get together, but we've placed the product liability with this other carrier, and we need general liability for slip and falls and all the other things that still happen at outdoor gatherings. Not saying that I've done that yet, but I'm saying that may be a way to close some of those gaps. But, you're still looking at maybe $6,000 for one Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. That was
Real money.
Yeah, that was something that was kind of prohibiting the whole situation. And no, that's an interesting angle right there. Because my previous life comes from live event production, and covering general liability for a one-day event is a relatively inexpensive, depending on the number of people who plan on attending and the venue.
$250,
Yeah, right. So that kind of thing is, it just blew me away, some of the quotes we were getting. And I understand, I mean, you're into risk mitigation, right? And you don't have the historical data on these types of events because they don't exist in the regulated market right now.
Yeah.
Until now. And Michigan is really unique to have these types of licenses. So
Yeah.
yeah.
We have started working on one social club, and just in the gathering, information gathering, and I do not have all the answers yet, but somebody for some amount of money will offer some terms. That's one thing the insurance companies are fairly good at, is if there's enough money out there, they will figure a way to put coverage together. So it just may not be everything that you always want, but again, more companies coming in, federally legal, maybe that makes companies say, hey, you know what, this could be done for $2,000 or $1,500.
Well, it's something for consumers out there to keep in mind too, that all of these extra costs that the regulated companies have to incur somehow has to be passed down in a way, and maybe not exorbitantly, but in some capacity, and that's what makes these regulated products a little bit more expensive than they could be. Once we get more competition, bringing the price down for options for coverage is a big thing. We were looking at, as far as the events go, I mean, it was almost 10% of the amount of coverage you needed to have guaranteed in order to have it underwritten.
Man.
Yeah, absolutely. No cheap solutions right now on that. I wish I had better answers for you, but the industry hasn't produced them yet.
Huh. Hey Mike, I got a question for you. I got a friend that's a licensee, and they had their building broken into, filed a claim, had been making payments, for years. It wasn't that big a claim, had it, and then immediately got, it's getting canceled for it. How does that work? Isn't that, I got used to get asked that question when I was in insurance, like, hey, I've been paying all these years, what's up? So, what can you do for somebody like that?
There are still carriers that will write it even though they got canceled. I think I'm a little bit like you. It's a little disappointing to hear that somebody had been paying premiums for a long time and then had a claim and then got canceled. You know, you don't give us money because we're good looking. You expect us to do something for you, and that's typically to pay your claims. And uh, otherwise, you just keep the money in your shoebox or your bank now or anything else, right?
Yeah.
But what I will say is sometimes there's a lot more to the story that we don't have all the details. So maybe it's that they weren't taking as many of the precautions as what they should have in order to have avoided the claim. So I will say, like a lot of carriers have a warranty that they put in place for cash and for finished products at your dispensaries or your grow facility that says, hey, I'm going to keep all of this finished product when we're not in store hours in a vault or in a locked secured safe that will uh, deter or prevent somebody from stealing or coming in. And a lot of times, if you've done all those things, not only does the claim go well, but they say, hey, you partnered with us to help us avoid having the claim. And I don't know the details that you're speaking about, but I don't know if they did everything that they should have, or if it was just a carrier that decided, hey, look, we're collecting $4,000. We paid out $400,000. We won't sell them insurance for the next 100 years to make up that loss. Maybe it's time to cut and run. And unfortunately, that's part of the business too.
For all that, that's interesting. Man, maybe I have to have you talk to them. Never know. What you have any like as far as like I know like you talked about the ease of getting referrals is great in cannabis insurance, but what about like the difficulties or like the situations you've been hard ones you've put in or any analogies of like that's different from insuring a regular business, things that you have to go through? I know we go through all kinds of crazy stuff,
Sure.
and I'm sure you do too.
Well, I would say that the policies that the cannabis community is buying are generally very basic policies. If you were restaurants, I could give you food contamination coverage and food spoilage coverage and cash coverage built in and loss of rents from the neighboring building and um, you know uh, sign coverage and really all the bells and whistles and part of that's because they've been around for 2, 3, 400 years, right? I mean, people going out for food, but the historical data on that, and I could sell it to you for $1,000. Those are all the things that are kind of missing in the cannabis world. Is you can get little bits of them, like I can get you sign coverage, which is property coverages are a little bit generally easier, but the cash coverage is a tough one to get, especially for dispensaries. We bid a crime policy, well, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago for $250,000 of coverage with a $50,000 deductible, and it was like $12,000 a year. And the client looked at it and just said, you know, we, we've got Dart Bank coming on a regular
Sure.
basis to pick these up. Do we really need to spend $12,000 on that? Or should we put that someplace else? So, a lot of that is challenging right now, because all the things I would typically want to throw in, computer coverage and cyber, those all have to be purchased individually, and the quality isn't maybe what it is on a restaurant or a contractor or an office building. They're more basic, I should say.
Hey Mike, can we talk social use lounge, because you brought it up, and
Sure.
you're working on one right now. You'd mentioned we're also working on one here in Kalkaska, and this is actually the biggest question that we have, and it's because we're building the plane while we're flying it, and of course we're asking people like you to insure the plane that's not built while it's in the air. Uh, it comes with really unique liability questions that we are still racking our brains on. I mean, you talk about, say, a bar and over serving and things of that nature, but with cannabis, it's a different animal. Don't have the historic data on as far as these types of lounges. I mean, what do you see? What do you think is the biggest liability when it comes to these lounges and what they're facing when just trying
Yeah.
to get up and running?
So, all right, if you were a bar, you've got really strong protections under the dram shop laws, right? So, we've insured bars for a long time, and I have seen 2 lawsuits, and the vast majority have all been thrown out, because the way the laws are written is that individual who is there consuming that alcohol still is the responsible party. Unless they are falling down and that bar owner is continuing to serve them, really it has to be a super high level of negligence on the bar owner for them to get pulled in. And I have not spent as much time as what I will need to as the social lounges continue to pop up. But my guess is that there are not those protections built in for the cannabis community. And if somebody is consuming on their property, do they have the same protections that you would if you're a bar owner? And, they consumed too much cannabis, then they got in the car and they drove and they killed somebody. Are they going to be able to say, hey, I just had this lounge and I didn't sell them anything? Are you still going to have those protections? And I don't know if there's a clear answer on that yet, but my guess is that there is not as much protection as there are for a bar owner. And
For cannabis, it's not as intoxicating per se as somebody drinking and driving. It's a completely
Sure.
different effect. But there are people that are, new to smoking, or maybe they had eaten too much of an edible before they even came in, and the onset takes longer for those types of things. So there's no way to gauge if somebody has eaten, say, a 200 or 500 gram edible before they came, a milligram edible, and they came in to your
You're-
lounge and even had a joint, and then all of a sudden someone's green on your couch, and you got to figure out, there's things you can do, but I mean,
Always.
it's like so many questions with
Yep,
that
you're,
type of
Tom,
situation.
you are spot on there in regards to, you have no idea what they were doing 40 minutes before they walked into your establishment. No idea. And unfortunately, I think some of those things are going to get cleared up in court cases. But I also think some of those are going to be 3 and 5 years down the road, as we know what is the real liability exposure. And do you have those exposures just being a social lounge where you don't have a license to sell any marijuana? I mean, you have a license to have a place where they can consume marijuana, but not to sell it.
Right.
So good questions. Not. I don't have the answer right now.
Right. Right. Of course. Yeah. build.
Hey,
we're
Mike,
going
it's
to.
Kevin over at True Cannabis.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, I just wanted to follow up with what Ryan was talking about earlier about someone getting canceled their insurance. Being that it's a state requirement, what is the state's approach to this thing when somebody's uninsurable?
Haven't run into it yet, but somebody has absolutely run into it. So part of the requirements, the easiest one to provide is the insurance, of course, because insurance is relatively inexpensive. But there are other avenues that you can do to satisfy the state. So you don't have to provide an insurance policy. That's just the easier one. You can provide that SARFA bond that we referenced. You could also do lines of credit and or escrow accounts with that cash in there, I believe. It's been a little bit since I've looked at all of the different options because again, the insurance one has been the easiest for people to obtain and the least expensive. But there are 3 or 4 other options for people to be able to say, hey, this is how I'm satisfying that financial requirement. It doesn't just have to be an insurance policy. Although, the insurance is the cheapest solution.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Mike, I forgot about that on that requirement. But I know a couple of us got some hard outs, and Mike, you made insurance entertaining, and that's not easy to do. I like a lot of the analogies, so I understand why you're good at it. That, and along with following up and asking questions, even though sometimes we don't want to answer them or give you all the information. So that's part of your job. I get it, but with that, I wanted to let Kevin over at True Cannabis. You got any final thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I want to apologize first off for my internet issues today. I only had a brief encounter with you, Mike, but I've got a ton more questions, so maybe I'll reach out to you when we get off the show. But anybody else that's trying to get some insurance in Michigan, Mike, tell them what they could do to get a hold of you.
Yeah, our email is mstein@fbinsmi.com or my phone number at 517-333-2060, and happy to help out. A lot of these questions we get is if they've already had, a bid from other carriers is, we're happy to take time and review them. One of the bigger things that we see now, challenges is people not insuring their buildings for enough. You two know probably better than anybody that the real cost to replace your building, and if you had to really sit down and look at how much it would take in the event of a total loss, my guess is you'd find yourselves underinsured. So I would really recommend people take a hard look at, especially today, the cost of building. You don't build anything nice for $100 a foot.
No.
$200 a foot. I mean, your world, you might be $300 and $400 a foot by the time you are looking at your lights and rolling tables and your heating and cooling. And I mean,
Everything's
really,
tripled.
yeah, really pay attention to the cost, because at time of loss, there's this nasty little co-insurance provision in an insurance policy, and believe that an insurance carrier is absolutely going to enforce it. Co-insurance is basically a requirement that says how much did you insure something for and how much should you have insured something for. Most carriers require you to insure it at 80% of what it should have been insured for. So if you build a building for $500,000 and at time of loss it costs $1 million to put it back, you are insured at 50%. Well, that means they only have to pay 50% of the claim. So if the claim was $250,000, you lost a grow room, they only have to pay $125,000. So don't think that for a minute just because you had $500,000 that that's what they owe you. They're going to look at co-insurance because it's in the contract and they can't enforce it. So don't give insurance companies a reason to not do what they told you they were going to do. spend some time with your agent, talk about the current costs of LED lights and current cost of heating and cooling systems and current cost of your filtration and your fans and your humidifiers and man, everything you guys have in your buildings, it's just all expensive. So, put pen to paper on it and get a good number, because at time of loss, you're going to expect that they go out and buy brand new LED lights and brand new heating and cooling and brand new filtration, and that's the job that you're going to want done. It's going to cost money. So don't skirt those things. There are other places to, take on more risk. Take on a $50,000 deductible as opposed to a $5,000. Because if your building burned down, it didn't matter whether it was 5 or 50. If they spend $2.5 million putting you back, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
That's a
now's
good
a good
point,
time
yeah.
to reassess your policies and make sure that it reflects the true nature of the market right now, and especially
Yeah.
the time that it takes to even get things built these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the world's changed with inflation and the lumber, obviously construction industry. You guys all know that even better than me. Tom, you got any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, it was really nice to talk to you, Mike. I have a
Yes.
feeling we'll be talking in the very near future about things. It's
sure.
it's great to get some insight, and I hope I didn't bust you too hard.
No, not at all.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
All right.
Well, once again, thanks for being on, Mike. Everyone knows how to
course.
get a hold of you. If you do got questions, obviously Mike's got the answers. He lives it and knows it inside out. So it's another great example of what we've been saying for over a decade. Look at all the different ancillary economies that are created. Mike, like a lot of people that are working HVAC, construction, insurance. There's a lot of people I talk to in the ancillary businesses that are part of the association. They're having their best years.
Yeah.
So it's great for Michigan. It's great for the economy. Thank God that we have it. And with that, I'll see everybody next week.
Go
Thanks, guys.
insurance.